Most traders think overtrading is a greed issue. That's the version that sounds acceptable. It's just excitement. I just wanted more opportunity. I got carried away. That explanation is comforting and wrong. Overtrading has nothing to do with wanting more money. If it did, traders would stop when the risk stopped making sense. They don't. They keep trading when setups degrade. They keep trading when conditions shift. They keep trading even when they're emotionally compromised. That's not greed. That's control. Overtrading is what happens when a trader cannot tolerate inactivity. When being flat feels worse than being wrong. When doing nothing feels like falling behind. The market didn't force those extra trades. Nothing broke. Nothing changed. You just felt unnecessary pressure to act. That pressure doesn't come from the chart. It comes from inside. Silence is uncomfortable for most traders. Stillness feels like vulnerability. Waiting feels like giving something up. So they trade to fill the gap. Not because the setup exists, but because inaction feels like loss. This is why overtrading spikes after a win, a loss, a missed trade, a slow session, different triggers, same behavior. The common factor is emotional instability, not opportunity. Overtrading is not bad discipline. It's failed emotional containment. A trader who overtrades is not chasing profit. They're chasing a sense of involvement. They want to feel plugged in. They want to feel active. They want to feel like something is happening because they're present. And the market is very good at exploiting that need. The human brain hates unresolved states. Not metaphorically, physiologically. Flat positions feel unresolved. Waiting feels unresolved. Potential feels unresolved. Nothing has happened yet, and the brain does not like that. It interprets unresolved states as incomplete tasks. Something is open. Something is pending. Something needs to be finished. That sensation is subtle, but constant. And over time, it becomes pressure. Your brain does not label this pressure accurately. It doesn't say, this is uncertainty. It says something is wrong. So it looks for a way to close the loop. In trading, the fastest way to create closure is to place a trade. Not a good trade, just a trade. That's why clicking the button feels relieving, even before the outcome, even before price moves, even before the trade makes sense. The relief comes immediately because the tension wasn't about execution quality. It was about being unresolved. Action resolves uncertainty emotionally, even when it increases it probabilistically. That's the contradiction traders live inside. This is where most traders lie to themselves. They tell themselves they're taking another opportunity. They say they're being active, engaged, responsive. In reality, they're regulating emotion. Overtrading is not strategic behavior. It's emotional regulation disguised as strategy. The brain does not want probability. Probability requires patience. Probability requires delayed feedback. Probability requires accepting that nothing happens for long periods. The brain hates that. It wants certainty. It wants resolution. It wants to know where it stands right now. Waiting offers none of this. Waiting has no feedback loop, so the trader manufactures one. They act. They lower standards slightly. They widen definitions just enough. They reinterpret rules that were once clear, not dramatically, not obviously, just enough to make the trade defensible. That's the dangerous part. Overtrading doesn't feel reckless in the moment. It feels reasonable. I've seen this setup before. It reacted here last time. It's basically the same thing. I don't want to miss it if it goes. None of those thoughts are emotional on the surface. They sound analytical, measured, experienced. But underneath them is discomfort. Discomfort with waiting, discomfort with not knowing, discomfort with not being involved. Each trade slightly reduces that discomfort, not because it's good, but because it gives the brain something to focus on. Now, the tension has an outlet. Win or lose, something is happening. This is why traders often feel calmer after entering a trade, even if the trade immediately goes against them. The anxiety didn't come from risk, it came from not being engaged. That's a critical distinction. Each time the trader clicks, the brain learns something important. It learns that action equals relief, not success. Relief. This is how the habit forms. The market doesn't have to reward you financially to reinforce overtrading. It only has to relieve emotional pressure. And once that association exists, trading stops being a decision making process. It becomes a compulsion, not emotional in the dramatic sense, compulsive in the clinical sense. The trader isn't chasing excitement, they're avoiding discomfort. That's why overtrading increases on slow days. That's why it spikes after a missed move. That's why it happens after a win, when there's nothing left to do but wait again. The trigger changes. The mechanism stays the same. Unresolved state, internal pressure, action as relief. Over time, the trader loses awareness of this loop. It feels natural. Being flat starts to feel wrong. Waiting starts to feel irresponsible. Selectivity starts to feel like hesitation. And activity feels like competence. At this stage, the trader confuses motion with effectiveness. They believe that more engagement equals more opportunity. But opportunity hasn't changed. Only tolerance for stillness has. This is why traders often can't explain why they took half their trades. When they review the session, it looks messy, unnecessary, unjustified. But in real time, it didn't feel like a decision. It felt like a response. They didn't choose those trades. They reacted to discomfort. That's why journaling often fails to stop overtrading. The problem isn't lack of awareness after the fact, it's lack of containment in the moment. When the brain associates relief with action, logic becomes secondary. The system can be profitable, the rules can be clear, the edge can be real, and the trader will still overtrade because the behavior is no longer about trading, it's about resolving anxiety. This is why telling yourself to be more disciplined doesn't work. You're asking willpower to fight a conditioning loop, and willpower loses that fight almost every time. Overtrading isn't excitement, it's anxiety seeking closure. And until that need is removed structurally, the behavior will repeat. Overtrading doesn't just damage P&L. That's the obvious cost. And honestly, the least important one. What it destroys first is signal integrity. When you trade too much, you dilute your edge. You stop knowing which trades matter. You stop trusting results. You stop learning from outcomes. Everything blurs together. Losses feel random. Wins feel undeserved. Confidence becomes unstable. Then discipline collapses quietly. Rules start to feel optional because you're already violating them. Selectivity disappears. Execution degrades. Now even good setups feel dangerous because you don't trust yourself anymore. This is the real damage, not money lost, self-trust lost. Over time, the trader becomes dependent on activity. They feel anxious on slow days, restless when nothing sets up, irritated when the market doesn't cooperate. They confuse boredom with opportunity. This is how traders burn out without realizing it. They're not tired of trading. They're tired of constant emotional regulation through action. And the market doesn't reward that behavior. It waits patiently while the trader exhausts themselves. Here's the rule. If trading makes you feel in control, you're already doing it wrong. Real control comes from constraint, not activity. You don't stop overtrading by trying harder. You stop it by removing the option. Overtrading disappears when trade frequency is predefined, maximum trades per session exist, rules eliminate marginal setups. Not because you suddenly gained discipline, but because there's nothing left to act on. The goal is not to resist trades. It's to design a system that doesn't invite them. Waiting should not feel virtuous. It should feel automatic. If you feel proud for not trading, you're still emotionally involved. Professional execution feels boring, neutral, uneventful. Overtrading ends when trading stops being emotional regulation. when boredom no longer triggers action, when flat feels complete, when you don't need the market to validate your presence. Most traders say they want consistency. Few are willing to tolerate the stillness required to earn it. Overtrading is not about opportunity. It's about intolerance for inactivity. Remove that intolerance, and the behavior disappears.